I saw him for the first time on a summer afternoon that smelled of dust, mango leaves, and wet earth. The sky hung low that day, heavy and golden, and the river ran slow, as if listening to something only it could hear. I was washing a copper pot by the water, humming a half-forgotten tune, when I felt someone watching me. I looked up, and there he was. He wasn't handsome in the way stories describe. His skin was tanned from the fields, his shirt half-tucked, and an old radio hung from his shoulder, playing a song that crackled with static. But there was something quiet about him, something that made the noise of the world fade for a moment. He froze when our eyes met, and then, for a second that lasted too long, we both forgot to look away. His name, I learned later, was Rahim. The shopkeeper told me he worked in the fields near the river and lived with his widowed mother. People said he was simple, maybe even too simple, the kind of man who believed the rain came because someone prayed hard enough. I don't know why that made me want to know him more. Days passed, and somehow we kept finding each other by the riverside. Sometimes he came with no reason, carrying a bucket that didn't need filling or pretending to fix his radio. I'd smile and pretend not to notice, but inside, my heart betrayed me every time I heard his footsteps on the rocks. We spoke little at first, about the river, about the crops, about nothing at all. Yet every silence between us felt full, like it knew what we didn't dare to say. He would bring pieces of jaggery from his home, and I would pack extra parathas for him in my lunch cloth. We'd sit on the stones, our feet in the cool water, watching the current twist and shimmer. There was a peace in those moments that I had never known before, like the world stopped rushing just to let us exist. Once, as the sun began to set, painting everything in copper and rose, he asked me, "Do you think love can stay the same forever?" I remember looking at the river and saying, "Maybe if hearts don't change?" He smiled softly and said, "Then promise you'll never stop coming here." And I promised because at 17, promises feel eternal. I started waiting for him every day. I'd finish my chores early, hide my excitement beneath my dupatta, and run to the river before anyone noticed. I told myself it was harmless, just two people talking. But deep down, I knew what it was. Every word, every laugh, every stolen glance became a secret thread binding me to him. Yet in a village, even the wind carries gossip. One afternoon, my uncle saw me by the river. He didn't speak then, but that night I heard him telling my aunt that city people were coming with a marriage proposal. "It's a good family," he said. "Don't let the girl lose her mind over village foolishness." My hands shook as I poured water into the clay lamp. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell him I had already given my heart away. But daughters in our home don't speak of hearts, they only obey. The next morning, I went to the river one last time. Rahim was already there, tossing stones into the water. I wanted to tell him everything, that I was being sent away, that I didn't want to go, but my voice refused to rise. He looked at me with those calm eyes and smiled, not knowing that smile would haunt me for years. "I might not come tomorrow," I finally whispered. He nodded, as if he already knew. "The river will still be here," he said quietly. "And so will I." That night, I left for the city. The train howled like something dying, and I pressed my face to the window until the darkness swallowed the fields, the trees, the river, him. My mother used to say that when you leave someone you love, a part of you stays behind. I didn't believe her until that night. Even now, after all these years, when I hear the sound of running water, I think of him standing by the riverside, sunlight on his face, holding his old radio, waiting for a promise that I never kept. It had been 12 years since I last saw the river. 12 years since I left that sleepy village with its rust-colored fields and restless winds. The city had changed me, or maybe it had only covered me with layers I no longer recognized. My husband had passed away the year before, and my mother's death brought me back home. I told myself it was only for a few days, to settle the old house, to say the prayers, but deep down, I knew there was another reason. When the bus dropped me near the bazaar, the village felt smaller, quieter. The same crooked tree stood near the well, and the air smelled of earth after rain. Faces had changed, voices had aged, and somewhere behind it all, the river still whispered like a forgotten song that refused to end. I walked there the next morning. My feet followed the old path as if they remembered better than I did. The grass was taller, the stone smoother, and the water clearer than I remembered. I stood there for a long time, afraid to look for him but unable not to. And then I saw him. Rahim was standing by the same bend in the river, his shirt sleeves rolled up, fixing a fishing net. Time had changed him, but not his quietness. His hair carried streaks of gray now, his face weathered like sun-worn wood. For a moment, he didn't see me. I could have turned away, could have left before memory turned into ache. But something in me, the girl who once promised forever, made me stay. When he finally looked up, the world seemed to pause. His eyes widened, then softened into something I couldn't name. He walked closer, slow, careful, as if I might vanish like smoke. "Sarah," he said, and my name trembled on his lips like a prayer forgotten too long. I smiled, but my throat burned. "You remembered," he laughed quietly. "The river remembers everything. We sat on the same rocks where we once shared parathas and jaggery. At first, we spoke of safe things, of seasons, of old neighbors, of how the world had become louder. But soon, silence filled the space between us, the kind that says more than words ever could. I wanted to ask if he was married, if he had children, if he ever stopped waiting. But I didn't. I was afraid of the answers. Instead, he told me about his mother's passing, about the years he worked the fields alone, and how the river kept him company when no one else did. "It's strange," he said. "I stopped expecting you to come back." But I never stopped looking. His words sank deep, heavier than I wanted them to be. I turned my eyes toward the water, but tears blurred it into a silver blur. "I didn't forget you," I whispered. "I just couldn't come." He didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he had stopped needing explanations years ago. As the sun dipped low, painting everything gold again, just like that first day, he reached into his bag and took out an old, battered radio. My heart stopped. "It still works," he said, smiling faintly. He turned the knob until a soft crackle filled the air, followed by a faint melody, the same song that once played the first time I saw him. For a while, we just listened, no words, no confessions. Just two people sitting by a river, pretending that time hadn't passed. When I finally stood to leave, he didn't stop me. He only said, "The river will still be here, Sarah. You know where to find me." That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the river echoed in my dreams, pulling me backward into everything I buried. The next morning, I went to the water again, but he wasn't there. Only the old radio sat on the rock, its antenna bent, still humming that same static tune. I touched it gently, tears falling before I could stop them. On the back, scratched faintly into the metal, were the words, "Some promises outlive time." I carried the radio home, holding it close as if it could still warm my hands. I didn't know if I'd see him again or if I even should. But as I looked out at the rising sun, something inside me whispered that the story wasn't finished yet. 3 months passed after I found the radio. The monsoon came, washing the fields clean, and the river swelled with a kind of force that both destroys and remembers. Every evening, I sat by my window, listening to the faint hum of that broken radio, half expecting Rahim's voice to drift through the static. He didn't return to the riverside, and people said he had gone to visit relatives in another town. But my heart told me he was still here, somewhere near the water, where promises didn't die so easily. One morning, I decided to visit his home. It was at the edge of the village, half hidden behind a neem tree, the same one I remembered from my youth. The door was open, but the house was quiet. Dust covered everything, the sharp pie, the clay pots, even the photographs on the wall. Then an old man from the neighborhood came and stood by the gate. "You're looking for Rahim?" He asked gently. I nodded. He sighed, eyes soft with a kind of pity that hurts more than words. "He felt ill last month. The doctor came too late. We buried him by the river. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world didn't break. It just went silent. The wind outside slowed. The birds stopped calling. And all I could hear was the sound of my own pulse, wild and hollow." I walked to the river that afternoon. The water was high, angry with the rains, but looked the same, eternal and different. Near the rocks where we used to sit, someone had placed a small wooden box, covered with a white cloth weighed down by pebbles. My hands trembled as I lifted it. Inside were a few things: a folded handkerchief, a small sketch of the river, and a note written in faded ink. "Sarah, if you ever come back and find this, know that I waited not because I was lonely, but because waiting for you was the only way I knew to love. Every time the river rose, I thought it was carrying your memory back to me. If I'm gone, don't cry by the water. Just sit and let the wind touch your hair. That's me. Rahim." I pressed the note to my chest, feeling the paper tremble against my heartbeat. I wanted to scream, to curse time, to undo every hour that had slipped through my hands. But instead, I sat down and listened, really listened, to the river. And somewhere in its endless murmur, I thought I heard his laugh. The villagers said I stayed there till sunset. They said I spoke to the water as if it answered back. Maybe it did. When the light faded, I placed the note and the handkerchief on the rock and whispered, "You kept your promise." I'm sorry I couldn't keep mine. After that day, I never left the village again. I repaired his house and lived there quietly, tending to the small garden he once planted. Every evening, I walked to the river with the old radio, turned its dial, and listened to the same soft static that once connected us. People thought I was mourning, but they didn't understand. I wasn't waiting for him to return. I was learning to live inside his memory. Years passed like the slow turn of seasons. My hair turned silver, my hands thin, but the river never stopped calling. Sometimes children from the village came to see the old widow by the riverside. They'd laugh and ask why I still brought that broken radio. I'd smile and tell them, because somewhere inside it still sings. Last night, the air smelled like rain again. The moon hung low, the river glowing under its light. I took the radio one final time and sat by the water. The static hummed softly, and for a moment, I swore I heard that old melody, the one that played the first day we met. I closed my eyes, feeling the cool breeze on my face, and whispered his name. The wind answered. I think that's when I finally understood some loves don't end with goodbyes. They just change their shape and wait for you on the other side of time. If anyone finds this radio after I'm gone, leave it here by the river. It belongs to the story that started and ended in the same place, where two people met, promised forever, and found it, not in life, but in memory. Because the river still flows. And somewhere in its song, we still are.